In the last section, we put together our fetch post action creator and wired it up to our reducer as well. We're now going to continue inside of our post show component. We'll start off by importing the action creator and wiring it up to this component, and then we'll make sure that we can fetch the actual post and display it inside of here as well. So let's get started. At the top, we'll start off by importing our connect helper from the React Redux library. And we'll also import the action creator that we just added in as well, which was post fetch. Let's double check that real quick. Fetch post, other way around. Fetch post from actions. Now we can hook this up with the connect helper to the component itself at the bottom. So we'll say connect. The second set of parentheses will go around post show. We do not yet have a map state to props function. I definitely expect we will, but we definitely do not have one yet. So we'll pass in null as the first argument. And as the second argument, we'll receive that action creator, fetch post. Okay, so that looks good. Now the real question comes down to when exactly do we want to call this action creator? So we've covered fetching data previously inside of our post index page. And we'd said inside of that component that we would place that data fetching action creator into a component did mount lifecycle method. Remember that component did mount would be automatically called once the component was rendered to the DOM. So I think that's totally appropriate approach to take this time around as well. So inside of post show, we'll define component did mount. And then inside of there, we can call that action creator. So this.props.fetch post. Do recall that these lifecycle methods have to be spelled correctly, so make sure that you don't have a typo in the word component. That's an extremely common error to make. Very common to misspell component accidentally. All right, so now the instant this component appears on the screen, we're going to reach out and fetch that post. Presumably, the action creator will fetch that post. It'll get added to our post piece of state. And that means that we then need to take that post out of our application level state and get it into our component with a map state to props function. So let's define our map state to props function. Map state to props will be called with the state object. And all we really care about the only property we really care about off of here is the post piece of state, or the post property. So we'll do a little bit of destructuring on the argument object and say, hey, you know what, just give me the list of posts here. Now, the last thing we need to take care of is to recall that we are always trying to fetch a very particular ID. So with fetch post up here, we want to make sure that we tell this post exactly what ID we're trying to access, or what post we're trying to get to fetch. And in the same case, down here with the map state to props, this is the big list of posts. And we don't really want to work with a big list of posts. We want to work with a very particular one. In both cases, we need to know about the ID that sits inside the URL, because that ID is the very important piece of state that we really care about, that is going to dictate exactly how this component behaves. So to get access to that URL, or the little token that's inside the URL, I should say, we will make access to a prop that is provided to us from React Router. So up inside the component did mount, we can access this.props.match.params.id. So this right here is provided to us directly by React Router. Now with React Router, the match right here is the top level property. The params property that's inside of it is an object that lists all the different wildcard tokens that exist inside the URL. So if we go back to the index.js file and we find our routes definition, we are not only limited to having one wildcard inside the URL right here. We could just as easily have maybe a comment ID as well, if we wanted to look up a very particular comment, if we imagine that we had comments. So that params object will contain all the different wildcard values that exist inside of our given URL. In this case, we only have the ID one, and so of course we're just saying, yep, we just want to get access to the ID out of the URL. Again, we need to make sure that this ID gets passed to fetch post right here. I think that it'd be appropriate to assign this to a variable right above it. So we'll do a little bit of destructuring there, and then we can say just fetch post with the given ID like so. Okay, so this definitely takes care of fetching a individual post, of telling that action creator, hey, I want a post with this given ID. Now going back to the map state to props, we had said, oh yeah, this post object right here, this is the big old list of posts. It's the big object that contains all the different posts inside of our application. So you might be thinking, okay, well, let's just use map state to props the way we always have. We can say return post right here. And then inside of the render function, because posts is the big list of posts, we might do something like posts with this.props.match.params.id. And that would result in the post we want to show. So you might be thinking, well, yeah, let's just use map state to props in the same old way that we're always used to. No big deal, just go for it. But you know what? This time around, we're going to do things just a little bit differently because I want to show you a little trick that's going to clean up a lot of the logic inside of your component and enable you to write them in a little bit more reusable fashion. So right now, you could really say that our post show component has a dependency on the huge object of all the different posts that exist inside of our application. It really does. Like this line right here. This clearly is expecting that we're going to get that huge list of posts, right? Without a doubt. However, the component really only cares about a very particular post, only one individual single post. So rather than passing the big list of posts into this component, I'm going to suggest that we figure out a way instead to only pass in a single post, just the one that we care about. Okay, so that's the goal here. I want to say, I don't want to make this component rely on the big list of posts. I want it to always expect it's going to receive one single component. So I'm going to clean up this line of code right here. And I'm going to clean up the return statement inside of map state to props as well. Okay, so here's the trick. Here's what we're going to do to make this a little bit more reusable. Here's our map state to props function. And we've said so many times nonstop that the first argument to it is our application state. But there is a second argument. The second argument is referred to by convention as OwnProps. So by convention, we call it OwnProps. OwnProps right here is the props object that is headed or going to this component right here. So whenever this component is about to be re-rendered or re-rendered on the screen, remember map state to props gets called to figure out what props the component needs. And map state to props is past all the props that were headed to post show. To put that another way, we could say essentially inside of here, this.props is absolutely equal to OwnProps. So of course the scoping here doesn't quite work out, but just to make it really clear, this.props is absolutely equal to OwnProps right here. So if you take that in consideration, then rather than returning the big list of posts right here, we can return just the single post that we care about, which would be posts ownprops.match.params.id. So now our component is only ever going to receive the single post that we care about, just this one post and not the big list. Now you might be saying, Steven, that's so ridiculous. What are you talking about here? We still are dealing with the big list of posts inside of this component right here, right? We're still dealing with the big list of posts inside the map state to props. What's the difference? Well, there is a difference. In many large applications, it's not entirely uncommon to create your map state to props functions in a separate file. So have a completely separate map state to props function, completely separate from the actual component. If we had taken that type of approach inside of this application and said, made map state to props in a second file, and this file would only contain post show, well then that's way more reasonable to say, yeah, this thing starts to get way more reusable. All of a sudden post show can be responsible for just showing a component and really doing not much else. And so it doesn't have that additional data dependency of getting the big list of posts. And if nothing else, it helps to just clean up the actual component right here. And I think that it kind of lessens the mental burden of remembering, oh yeah, okay, that's the big list of posts. I need to just access the one that I really care about. So maybe if our render method needed to refer to the post, We could say this.props.post right here. And if we had like a helper function, we could just say this.props.post, which is way more compact than doing something like, you know, something like this in both locations. Far more compact, far more legible than the other approach. So really the full approach, I'm sorry, it would have been something a little bit more like that. Yes, okay, there we go. So far more legible to just say this.props.post as opposed to doing this lookup every single time inside the component. Okay, so a little bit of a side there. I know I kind of went off the rails, but again, this is a very important technique to be aware of, that you can really use map state to props, not just to select little pieces of state off the global state object, but also to do some intermediate calculation of sorts inside here as well. So last step we have to do, we have to pass in map state to props to the connect function. There we go. Now this section has gone on awfully long, so let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and make sure we show some details off of this very particular post inside of our component. So I'll see you in just a second. Oh, and you know what? I just realized I think I put a little typo in here. I got a semicolon at the end of the render function right there. My mistake. So let's clean that up. Okay, so that's better. Now I'll see you in the next section.